Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, the more you care, the less things seem to work? The more you try to control, the more everything slips away? Have you ever tried to force someone to love you? Have you ever chased peace so hard you lost your breath? And what if the secret isn't in trying harder, but in stopping?
In this video, you'll understand why everything you want most, love, success, clarity, calm, starts to slip away precisely when you try to control too much. Inspired by the ideas of Michel de Montaigne and the so-called law of reversed effort, we'll explore how the obsession with results creates the anxiety that paralyzes you, and how true emotional freedom begins when you let go of the steering wheel of life. Get ready to see chaos in a new light. Subscribe now, activate the bell, and comment below. Have you ever managed to achieve something only after finally stopping trying? Let's get into the video. We live with a subtle lie embedded in the soul that to control is to survive. From an early age, we're taught that if we do everything right, if we plan with precision, if we work hard enough, we'll get everything we desire. Someone's love, others' approval, professional success, inner peace. This narrative, seemingly logical, shapes our behavior like an invisible armor. But there's something no one tells you. The more you try to control, the more you suffer. Because control, no matter how much it looks like strength, is just fear in disguise. We try to control time, even when it slips mercilessly through our fingers. We try to control others, even when they are made of wills that will never be ours. We try to control even what we feel, as if it were possible to erase sadness with mental commands or force joy with positive affirmations. And the cruelest part is that this constant attempt to tame the uncontrollable not only fails, it also makes us sick. The heart grows tired. The mind collapses. The soul hides behind smiling masks that scream silently for help. The illusion of control is an addiction of those who think too much. We chew on future scenarios, mentally replay past conversations, plan each step as if it were possible to avoid pain, loss, emptiness. But the price of that is living in constant surveillance, in a chronic tension that corrodes spontaneity. When everything depends on your effort, every failure becomes guilt. When everything depends on your performance, every silence becomes rejection. Life becomes an emotional minefield, and you, a soldier who never rests. Michel de Montaigne, writing from his solitary tower, was one of the first to see this drama with disconcerting clarity. He realized that most of our deepest sufferings never actually happen. We live terrorized by hypotheticals, haunted by ghosts we ourselves create. And the more we fear, the more we try to control. And the more we try to control, the more we feed the fear. It's a cruel cycle. The attempt to avoid pain ends up becoming the source of it. Take human relationships, for example. We try to control love, but love cannot be forced. We try to control affection, but affection cannot be demanded. We live expecting the other to say what we want to hear, do what we want, be what we fantasize. And when they fail, we're frustrated. But maybe the failure isn't theirs. Maybe the error is in our expectation. We love, but with reins. We care, but with conditions. And so, relationships don't die from lack of feeling, but from excess control. Deep down, control is a way to try to anesthetize vulnerability. If I know what's going to happen, I won't get hurt. If I can predict everything, I won't be caught off guard. But living in constant avoidance of pain is like walking around with your body permanently stiff. Eventually, you break. There's more courage in accepting chaos than in trying to conquer it. Control is a defense against life, and for that very reason, it distances us from the most authentic experience of being alive: surrender. The truth is, control doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It turns possibilities into threats. It turns encounters into emotional negotiations. It turns the present into a place where you only survive, never inhabit. When you need everything to be under your command in order to feel okay, you're a prisoner. And the prison isn't in the circumstances, it's inside you. You don't live, you monitor. You don't love, you analyze. You don't feel, you manage. That's why life, paradoxical as it may seem, only starts to come together when you stop trying to make everything fit, when you let go, When you allow things to be as they are, even if that means not being in control, chaos, when accepted, becomes a dance. Imperfection, when embraced, becomes poetry. And uncertainty, when no longer feared, becomes freedom. Because maybe the peace you've been seeking isn't in control, but in the courage to let it go. Try to sleep. Now, close your eyes, press your mind, repeat to yourself, I need to sleep. I need to sleep. And see what happens. Nothing. Sleep slips away. The mind spins. The body locks up. Because sleep, like love, like peace, like everything that is essential, does not come from effort. It comes from surrender. That's the paradox no one ever taught us. That there are things that only emerge when we stop demanding them to happen. The British psychologist Alan Watts called this the law of reversed effort. The more you try to float, the more you sink. The more you try to relax, the more you tense up. The more you chase happiness as an obligation, the further away it seems. It's like trying to grab water with clenched fists. Everything slips through. It always slips through. We were raised to believe that trying harder is always the solution. That those who suffer simply didn't try hard enough. That if you haven't succeeded yet, it's because you haven't tried hard enough. But that's a lie, a dangerous lie, because it turns everything into pressure. And it turns you into an unfinished, anxious, eternally insufficient project. The modern mind is collapsing not from a lack of desire, but from an excess of demand. The weight of I need to be happy, I need to be loved, I need to heal, suffocates any possibility of lightness. You can't rest because resting feels like wasting time. You can't enjoy yourself because you feel like you should be producing. And even when you love, you carry the guilt of not loving correctly. Effort has become a prison. The search has become torture. Montaigne saw this despair centuries before we had the internet and packed schedules. He saw men trying to force confidence, trying to fabricate joy, trying to be what others expected. And he noticed something essential. The more a person tries to prove they trust themselves, the less they actually do. Because those who are at peace don't need to convince themselves of it all the time. Those who are, simply are, without pressure, without performance. Look at the artists, the athletes, the masters of improvisation. Their best moments don't happen when they're trying to get it right. They happen when the tension disappears, when the mind goes quiet, when the body moves by instinct, not by demand. This is the so-called flow state, a place where the self disappears and only the doing remains. But to get there, you have to let go of control. You have to get out of the way. Most people never reach that place, not because they lack talent, but because they're afraid to let go. Fear says, if I stop trying, I'll fail. But the truth is, sometimes trying too hard is exactly what keeps you from arriving. You don't need to chase what's already yours. You just need to step aside. The answers you've been so desperately seeking might be hiding in the silence between your screams, but you need to quiet down to hear them. To trust is not to believe everything will turn out fine. It's to accept that it might not and still keep going. It's to take a deep breath in the middle of uncertainty and say, I surrender, not because I have guarantees, but because I no longer want to live in fear. It is that courage, the courage not to control, that begins to set you free. Because the more you force, the more you lose yourself. But when you let go, maybe for the first time, you begin to find yourself. Comment below, I let go. If starting today, you're going to stop trying to control everything and start living with lightness, presence, and truth. There is a painful confusion that spreads through sensitive hearts. Like a slow poison, the idea that detaching means stopping loving, as if letting go were a sign of weakness, as if allowing something to leave meant abandoning it, as if truly loving meant never letting go of someone's hand, even if that person had left a long time ago from the inside. But the truth is different. Detaching is not becoming cold. It is becoming free. It is not about no longer feeling. It is about starting to feel in a cleaner way, without illusion, without obsession, without imprisonment. How many times have you held on to something so tightly, a relationship, a project, an idea of yourself, that has started to die from suffocation? How many times have you confused attachment with love, control with care, presence with possessiveness? We insist on keeping close what no longer wants to stay. We struggle to sustain bonds that have already lost their soul. And the result is always the same: the weight, the exhaustion, the pain of trying to resurrect what no longer wants to live. True detachment begins with the most painful and most mature recognition of all, that not everything you love will remain. And that's okay, because true love doesn't demand permanence. It demands freedom. To truly love is to want what's best for the other person, even if that good happens far from you. It is knowing that care is not about holding on, but about allowing. And to allow is, many times, to let go. With respect, with gratitude, with tearful eyes, but with a peaceful heart. Montaigne viewed life the way one observes a fire. He didn't want to tame the fire. He wanted to be warmed by it. He accepted that fire dances, burns, and extinguishes, and that the beauty lies precisely in that, in impermanence. He said that it is easier to endure death without thinking about it than to live trying to avoid it. In other words, what hurts us is not the end of things, but our desperation to prevent them from ending. Suffering is born from resistance, not from reality. Detaching is, deep down, an act of courage. It's the moment when you look at what once meant everything to you, a person, a dream, an identity, and realize that it no longer fits, that it already fulfilled the role it had to play. And then you let it go, not with anger, not with indifference, but with love. Because loving is also knowing when to stop insisting, to stop hurting yourself, to stop abandoning yourself out of fear of losing the other. It's not about giving up. It's about maturity, about recognizing that you don't need to hold on to crumbs to prove you're capable of love, that you don't need to sacrifice yourself to deserve being seen, that you don't need to maintain everything all the time to prove you're strong. Detachment is, paradoxically, about finding yourself. It is about stepping out of the role of savior, of emotional provider, of martyr, and finally returning home to yourself. And it's curious. When you let go, something changes. You begin to love in a different way. A love without demands, without pressure, without dependency. A love that offers shelter, but does not shackle. A love that welcomes, but does not invade. Think of a tree. It doesn't trap the bird in its branches. It offers shade, rest, shelter. And it is precisely because of that that the bird returns. Because no one returns to what suffocates them. But everyone longs for the likeness of someone who knows how to let go. In the end, detachment is not absence. It is pure presence. It is to love without fear of losing. It is to care without wanting to control. It is to be whole even when the other is not. It is to know that if something needs to go, you still remain you. And that is perhaps the deepest point of all. Only those who no longer fear losing themselves are capable of letting go. Life, at times, feels like a puzzle handed to us without a reference image. You open the box and find disconnected pieces, pains that hurt, joys that pass too quickly, heavy silences, encounters that seem random, voids that stubbornly refuse to be filled. And then, in despair, you try to build something coherent. You try to fit everything together as fast as possible, as if finding the meaning of life were a race against time. But the more urgency, the more chaos, the more expectation, the more frustration. It's hard to accept that some pieces simply don't fit right now, that there are parts of your story that still don't make sense, that there are pains that have no immediate explanation. The impulse is to force a narrative, force a fit, force a happy ending. But when you try to push a piece into a place where it doesn't belong, it's not just the puzzle that gets distorted, it's you who gets hurt. Because the effort to pretend everything is fine when it isn't wounds the soul. Have you ever tried to put a puzzle together in anger? Tried to jam in a piece that almost fit, just because you desperately wanted it to? That's how we live, so often. Trying to shove people into emotional spaces they don't want to occupy. Trying to make fleeting situations eternal. Trying to fit ourselves into life plans that no longer suit us. And every time we force a fit, we lose a little of the real image that's trying to emerge. But something magical happens when you stop. When you breathe, When you look at the pieces with new eyes, without anxiety, without despair, it's in that moment that some connections begin to appear. It's in that silence that certain fits start to make sense. Not because you forced it, but because you waited, because you trusted, because you finally allowed life to show you what it had been trying to say all along, without shouting. Montaigne sensed this. He understood that living is more about observing than dominating, more about listening than declaring. He saw the human mind trying to make sense of everything and losing itself because of it. He realized that the most important pieces don't fit when demanded, but when accepted. That understanding doesn't come from the force of logic, but from the humility of being present, even without having all the answers. The problem is that we were taught to fear chaos, to panic in the face of doubt, to confuse uncertainty with failure. But chaos, when embraced, reveals a deeper order. Not a predictable mathematical order, but an organic, subtle order that only reveals itself to those who don't try to control it. It's the order of intuition, of patience, of listening. The order of what blooms on its own when you stop uprooting things before their time. Letting go of control over the puzzle means stopping living in function of anxiety about results. It means trusting the process even without seeing the final picture. It means understanding that some pieces are face down, others haven't arrived yet, and some, maybe, will never fit. And that's okay. The meaning of life is not about assembling a perfect image. It's about accepting the beauty of what emerges little by little in the gaps of the unexpected, in improbable encounters, in mistakes that transform. And then, one day, without warning, you look at what was once only confusion and you see a shape, an outline, a beginning of truth. Not because you finally understood everything, but because you finally accepted that you didn't need to. And that's when the image starts to appear, not as something complete, definitive, but as something alive, in motion, profoundly human. There are rare moments when time disappears. You are so present in what you're doing that you forget yourself. There is no tension, no pressure, no weight of needing to get it right. There is only action. Body and mind dance together, effortlessly, as if moved by something greater than your own will. This state, well known to artists, athletes, and visionaries, is called flow, the state of flux. A space where the self dissolves, anxiety quiets, and all that remains is life unfolding. But flow cannot be forced. It doesn't respond to urgency. It doesn't arise in the midst of panic, pressure, or the desperate attempt to control every outcome. Flow is born from surrender, from presence, from a kind of trust that demands no guarantees. It's when you're so deeply connected to the now that you forget to control what comes next. When you let go of the plan, the script, the expectation, and simply do, without wondering if it will work, without trying to impress. You simply do, because that is you, without effort. This is the point so many never reach, because they're too busy trying to be perfect, productive, recognized. The cruel paradox of modern life is this: the more we try to prove our worth, the more we lose access to what is truly valuable. Creativity dies when pressured, pleasure hides when demanded, and love disappears when required. Flow is the reward for those who let go, for those who trust, for those who are whole, even without being in control. Montaigne, in his chosen solitude, knew this. He didn't chase truth with violence. He watched it emerge, as if truth were a shy flower that only blooms when no one is looking. He understood that to force thought is to push clarity away, and to force life is to push life away. Flow, at its core, is the state of someone who has already realized they don't need to prove anything to exist. That authenticity isn't in effort, but in permission. You allow yourself to be, and because of that, everything flows. That's why the most beautiful moments of your life probably weren't planned. They were the ones when you felt light, when you laughed without calculating, loved without strategy, created without fear of making mistakes. You weren't trying to impress. You just wanted to live. And ironically, it was in that moment that you impressed the most. In the end, maybe what you were looking for was never outside. It wasn't in that person who left. It wasn't in that perfect version of yourself that you tried to force. Not even in the detailed plan you created so you wouldn't fail. What you were searching for was always in the space between the attempts, in the gap between thoughts. In the silent moment, when exhausted from trying, you finally stopped, and then everything began to fall into place. Stopping caring isn't giving up on life. It's giving up on the illusion that you need to control it all the time. It's letting go of burdens that were never yours to carry. It's releasing the guilt of not achieving what was never under your control. Stopping caring is, paradoxically, starting to truly live, because you only live when you let go. When you stop trying to prove, to conquer, to win, to please, space opens up. And in that space, something is born that you may have never felt before. Lightness. Lightness is not the absence of pain. It is presence without resistance. It is looking at what hurts without drowning. It is recognizing that you're not ready, and that's okay. That you don't have all the answers, and still you go on. That you don't control what comes or goes, but you remain whole nonetheless. That is real freedom. The freedom of not needing to be more than you already are. The freedom of not needing to win to be worthy. The freedom of not needing applause to keep walking. So, if today you feel like everything is out of order, maybe that's the sign that it's time to stop trying to organize everything, to loosen the reins, to breathe in the midst of chaos, to trust the movement of life, even without understanding. Because the truth is simple, but deep. When you stop caring about what never depended on you, what really matters finally begins to reveal itself. If you're tired of being used and want to transform your self-esteem from the inside out, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell. Let's keep walking this path together. This journey of awakening and personal power with the eternal lessons of philosophy. Some may think this was the end, but be careful. The war isn't over yet. There are still things left unsaid. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. One of them talks about an invisible pattern that might explain why you self-sabotage exactly when things start to go well. But I'm not going to tell you which one it is. You'll have to take the risk and click. So, which one will you choose?